everyone, this week we're going to start drawing from the figure, and one of the best ways to get good at drawing the figure is to practice, and one of the best ways to practice is by what we call gesture drawings. Gesture drawings are usually pretty quick, and the main goal of a gesture drawing is not to make a believable portrait or a likeness, but to just capture the gesture of the figure, of the skeleton. There is a video that I posted on Blackboard that describes an easy method of doing this, which is called the Loomis method. And I will be using that method and also sort of adding some of the notes about proportion from the textbook. There's also a website that I linked to in this week's reading materials that's artmodeltips.com. And you'll see the link, and the website has a number of poses from models. So because we're not a live class, we don't have a live model. So we are going to reference these poses. For this assignment, you'll want to look at the standing poses. So they have a gallery of standing male poses and standing female poses. I'm looking at the standing male poses right now, but you can start with the standing female poses if you'd rather. But the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make a circle that's going to indicate my model's head. So here is his head, and I want to take this head and make it a unit of measurement. So the book suggests that the human male, adult male, is 8 heads tall. So if you can make 8 circles that are pretty close to the same size, as close as you can get, I know that with my standing pose, if his head's here, his feet are going to be somewhere right down here. So now I'm just going to try to look at what we call the S-curve of the spine. So I see his neck, and I see that the bottom of this second head should come to right about the center of the sternum. And right at the center of the sternum, the spine starts to sort of straighten out back the other way. It's a very subtle pose, or a very subtle curve in this figure, so I don't want to overdo it. The torso ends at about 4, and that's where his legs are going to start. And I'll put, I'm going to measure his hips. So there's usually an angle of the hips, so they're probably never going to be straight across, up and down. So I'm going to measure the angle of what I think these hips are. I think it's like this. And that's going to give me this sort of a line for the hips, this kind of an angle. And then I am going to start my legs and my feet. So my kneecap should be about here. And this leg is pretty straight down. This leg, coming from this hip, the kneecap is going to be slightly lower, but the leg is going to be about the same. I just need to get his arms in. So the same thing here. His shoulders are going to be about here. This shoulder is slightly higher than the other, but not too much. So I don't want to exaggerate this too much. So I have 2 different angles for the shoulders and the hips. And the hip angle is pretty severe and the shoulder angle is pretty slight. So I want to make sure I get that. His hand comes down to right here, right at the top of his thigh. And this hand curls around. So now that I have this skeleton, what the video proposes when they're talking about the Loomis method is that this is all you need. If you can get this stick figure to reflect the S-curve of the spine, now you can put in all of the details that you need. And you don't need to put in that much. The video proposes that you do this by what you know about anatomy, what you know about the musculature. And you might not know that much, but I think it's actually better to do this part based on observation. Everybody is sort of a little bit different. And I think that it's good to just be in the practice of looking very carefully whenever you can. So something like the Loomis method is good, but it also can make you too reliant on these systems, and sometimes you could stop looking. And that is not what you want to do. So I'm not really thinking, at this point, I'm definitely not thinking about what anything should look like, because I already did my theoretical drawing when I drew the stick figure. I'm just thinking about what it does look like. And I'm looking for little subtle curves and little bumps and things that are going to make this figure ultimately seem more believable. I'm not going to make a portrait of him, but I'm just going to sort of indicate slightly where his hairline is and where the features are, but I'm not thinking about too much about what they are. His neck looks much too long here, so I think that his head has to be a bit bigger. And maybe that this shoulder has to come up a bit more. But that was a pretty quick drawing that I did in just a few minutes, and I think that that's good enough to move on to the next. So I'm going to find another standing male pose, and I'm going to do another drawing from the same Loomis method. So what you want to do this week is you want to fill your page with at least 5 drawings drawn using this Loomis method. They don't need to be any more detailed than this. Try to get the general stick figure and then put in some of the musculature around it, build the musculature around it. I would pick poses that are standing upright because those are going to be the 8 heads tall. Once you get into a pose that's sitting or foreshortened, it's not going to be as clear with the 8 heads tall. So I'm going to do one more on video, but then when you do this assignment for yourself, you are going to do more. This pose looks a little bit more challenging, and because it's harder, I'm going to give myself a little bit more room because I find it easier to draw a little bit bigger. So this is going to be my head size. So here we go. Here our figure is going to be a little bit bigger than the last one. And he is in a slightly different pose. He's sort of turning in space. So if you did a pose like this, it'll be kind of a good practice for your foreshortening, because while he's not foreshortened the long way, he is foreshortened sort of the other way a little bit. Like his chest is going to be a little bit foreshortened because it's turning away from us. Foreshortening in the figure can be challenging, so it's good to get a little practice in. So here is his chest. And again, I'm going to try to get his sternum to reach the bottom of that number 2 head. And at the end of number 4 is where our legs are going to start. So if I start this hip and this hip, this one is slightly higher, but this is another example where I don't want to go too much. Let me also measure the shoulders. If I've got this shoulder here, it's also slightly higher than this shoulder here. So I've got this line, these are the angles of the hips and shoulders. And now my legs, this leg is bent very far back. So I want to get that angle. I'm going to go up over my numbers. feel less certain about this drawing. Let me get my arms. But I'm going to make it work. So here is my stick figure. It's more or less proportionate. The thing that I'm less concerned about is this foot. And I think one of the things that's distracting me about it is that my numbers are making it so that I can't really see what I need to see. So I'm going to get rid of those. And I'm just going to try to quickly sketch in a foot that works and looks believable. So this is where I'm sort of merging my own perceptual techniques with this Loomis method, because I'm going to have to make a couple of changes here. And you might have to as well. That's okay. You could be able to tell by eye if something is working proportionally or not. It's a good thing to be able to tell if you can. But I think that's going to be my leg for now. I still might change that. But this leg is more or less straight and is actually going to come slightly lower than it. And now I just need to make sure this hand ends about here. Again, I'm going to get rid of these numbers. They've already served me. They've already done what they need to do for me. So I don't need them anymore. And I'll give myself some room. So one of the things that's happening is that the chest and the arm, you have part of the arm that disappears here behind and it sort of re-emerges out on the other side of the chest. So that's what's making it look like it's turning in space, and getting that is going to be very important. This figure looks sort of like he's taking a step. So there's his hand. And now I really just have to get this leg. I'm looking at things like negative shapes. They're very important in the figure, so I think about the negative shape between this leg and this hand, and if that looks accurate. I also think that his arm looks too skinny, so even though it does disappear, when it reemerges, it is a little bit wider. So these are very quick sketches that you could just do in a few minutes. They're not going to give you enough information, like that you would know who the drawing is of or any sort of specific like that, but it does give you enough information to know what the gesture is like. So for example, I feel that from this drawing, I can tell that this figure is taking a step, and that's going to be the goal. I could tell that this figure is sort of standing with this leg engaged and he has this arm raised. So if you have an idea of the gesture, then that's good. So fill your page with these, do at least 5. And they shouldn't take more than a few minutes each. All right, have fun.